a climate emergency here in Bath and North East Somerset, and I'm really glad that you could all join us this evening and that John Adler of Freshford Parish Council has been able to join us. So this is our weekly Climate Conversations webinar. Last week's event is now up on my YouTube channel, and you can join future events by looking for Sarah Warren's Climate Conversations on Eventbrite and booking in. So first this evening, we're going to hear from John, and whilst he and I are chatting, you can go to the Q&A button and you can post your questions. So John and I will have a chat, and then after that, my colleague, Councillor Matt McCabe, will field your questions and put them to John. So, John Adler, Chair of Freshford Parish Council, I'm really delighted that you could be here.
Thank you very much for having me, Sarah.
No problem. Would you like to start by telling me how it comes about that you are chair of Freshford Parish Council?
It's one of those things in life that is more by accident than design. How much in life do we actually plan? In the village, I was asked to help a friend out on the parish plan and ended up leading on the subject of facilities. On that project, the parish council chairman and I had a total disagreement, and there was a full and frank exchange of views, all very polite and respectful, but completely opposite views. Someone left the parish council and he approached me to be co-opted, being impressed because he wanted a spread of views. So I joined the parish council, and time went by, the years went by. Few parish council chairs had come and gone and reached a point where the current chair wanted to resign. He didn't want to continue on the parish council, and no one else wanted to be chair. So it's more a case of, well, if I didn't become chair, then what would have happened is someone would have left the parish council, someone else would have been co-opted, and they'd have been chair. And I thought, this is not democracy.
So how long is it you've been chair for?
2 years now.
Right. And can you tell us a little bit about Freshford?
Freshford is it's a changing population. It's changing all the time. We've got a higher than average percentage of elderly. The facilities in the village do, though, attract young people starting up families. And we're finding the demographic is very much that youngsters go off to the big city, enjoy life, and as they start families, that's when they gravitate back towards the villages. So there's actually a growing number of young families in the village, which is fantastic. And it's bringing about a whole, it's a breath of fresh air in terms of views within the community. I mean, for example, one young lady who's not long moved to the village, she's an artist and is building a rainbow on the tiling out of stones with the children. And the elderly absolutely love it. So we're getting the young and the old working together.
That's lovely. So, as a parish council, you've declared a climate emergency. So how did that come about?
That came about, I'll hold my hand up, it's something that's close to my heart. There's two sides to the parish council, one before the last election and one after. Before the last election, we had an application in the village to put solar panels on the school, which I think many people will have heard about. It was in the papers and a lot about it. The parish council at the time refused to support that application, which caused huge uproar in the village. It actually motivated a lot of youngsters to stand for the parish council to try and get more up-to-date views to be represented, which is good. Post elections, Some people didn't get voted on, some people stood down, and we now have a totally different construct in terms of views. There's now a spread of views rather than, it's a phrase I hate using, but it sums it up nicely, old school. Um, and the solar panel application was resubmitted and was passed by a huge majority. That gave me the confidence to move forwards with the climate emergency motion, as that is a subject close to my heart. So we now, and I found that there is very widespread support for this in the community. It's not a topic that's on the edge, it's a topic that's in everybody's minds, which is fantastic.
So what did your climate emergency declaration say?
Said, I've actually got a slide for that. Shall I bring it up so everyone can see?
Yes.
I've lost, I don't have screen share any longer. Okay. The motion was to read it out. Freshford PC resolves to recognise the existence of a climate emergency. The PC fully supports the Baines initiative, the Baines Declaration on the climate emergency. The PC will work with the Freshford community and community organisations, Baines and other parish councils to establish specific local initiatives that will contribute to and enhance all aspects of our locality. Sorry,
And we've lost you for a minute there.
I went mute. At what
Yes,
point?
you got muted there after locality, so you better tell us again.
After locality, right. Contribute to and enhance all aspects of our locality, including transport, the built environment, the natural environment, ecology, and renewable energy.
Right, and so what do you think? What achievements have you been able to pull off as a result of declaring it, or what has it changed?
It was beginning to change, and then we've had this lockdown. The immediate impact it's had is of knowing that there is backing to take the climate emergency forwards. The next step was to hold a community meeting. So the initiatives were community defined rather than the parish council dictating how things should be.
Mm-hmm.
There was widespread agreement for this, and the subject had moved from being, do we really need to address this, to are we actually going to fit everybody in Freshford Memorial Hall, which is not a small hall. There are a whole host of initiatives that people within the community wish to move forwards with. We've been approached on things like rewilding, tree planting, how to manage transport, cars through the community. And this is people within the community coming forwards with their ideas for their initiatives, which is fantastic. If it wasn't for this lockdown, we'd be pushing forward with these.
Absolutely, yes. Actually, there's been so I live in Bath Eastern, and we haven't declared a climate emergency year yet. But just before the lockdown, I was talking with some of the parish councillors, and there's been a bit of a buzz of ideas around climate emergency here as well. And in the same way, we've had a bit of a spanner in the spokes as a result of the lockdown, I think. So some people wonder what the point of a parish council declaring a climate emergency is when it's a global emergency and a parish is tiny.
Yes, I've heard that said too. However, we do make decisions that do impact the environment. We have a neighbourhood plan, so we've got a huge say over our local ecology. Our neighbourhood plan is actually up for review this year, so the climate emergency will be affecting how the neighbourhood plan is amended, which is going to have to go out for referendum again, of course. But we're expecting to address areas such as planning, because that's another area impacted by climate emergency. What we can demand of new houses or extensions being built to existing houses to address the aspect of moving towards carbon neutrality. We can bring in all sorts of things as a parish council to help with plastics, with recycling. So it's really down at the nitty gritty local level. Then, if you look at the wider environment, historically, parish councils have been dealing with very small localized issues. And I'm wondering if some of the bigger issues aren't actually lots of smaller localized issues drawn together to one big one. What I mean by that is, let's take renewable energy. If we were to become totally self-sufficient, totally reliant on renewable energy as a local community, why do we need wait for national activity? Why can't we just do this?
I tell you what, renewables, the neighbourhood plan is quite important as well, isn't it, in the planning process?
Absolutely, it's critical.
If you're on a parish council and you've got a good site in your parish that you think would be suitable for wind, I think it's quite important as far as the planning process goes to get that mentioned in your neighbourhood plan.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. One, there is a positive part of this delay, which is it's given quite a few people time to sit back and think. And we work very closely with Limpy Stoke, and some people there and some people here have been thinking more about what we're thinking about in this area, and they're coming round to supporting these initiatives. Says he, grasping at straws for positivity out of the lockdown.
Yes. Well, one thing I've thought about declaring a climate emergency at parish level is, and I wonder if you agree, I don't know. Do you think it brings it closer to people? Do you think it gets people talking?
I think it empowers people, more importantly, because they're seeing the parish council is taking this seriously, and they then feel empowered to not only put ideas forwards, but to question us on our decisions, which is happening. And I have to say, they do raise some rather difficult but very good points.
Absolutely, actually, since I've taken over as cabinet member in Bath and North East Somerset, people write to me all the time saying, "You've declared a climate emergency. Why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that?" Because it doesn't fit with the climate emergency, and that is absolutely right. They should continue to do that.
We have on a smaller scale the same in Freshford. I mean, we had to bring a tree down because it was taking a wall down that's mentioned in the conservation plan. Absolutely no option. Um, but of course, it's taking a tree down. Oh dear.
Well, there are some difficult dilemmas, aren't there, that you
There are.
have on the council.
There are. So we'll be planting some more trees elsewhere.
So tell me some more about the school and the solar panels, because you started to tell us, but I think there's more of a story there.
There's a huge story here. Um, it was a concept that was actually built by the children. There's something called the Sparks Initiative, which people may have heard of, where they're going round schools within the Baines area talking about energy and the climate. And the school children think about it and come up with schemes and ideas on how things can be improved. It's wonderful hearing the view through the eyes of children. The phrase I use, before they become adulterated by experience. I usually say corrupted, but hey. Um, and the children went through looking at all the different types of ways of becoming self-sufficient in energy at the school. They actually ran this project and they investigated the pros and cons and came up with solar panels. on something that was not only doable, but actually worked. And that idea from the children was then picked up and taken forwards, and a planning application put together. Some serious investigation was done, and that gave rise to the application that was not supported by the parish council. The children put together a film which is actually fantastic, and if there's anyone who wonders about the future of this country, just look at that film, at what our children can do. This was made by them. People don't believe it.
You can find that on YouTube, can't you?
You can. What that did, the effect of that was that galvanized the community. It really was not pleasant going down to the shop during that period. Being the chair of the parish council, as everyone knows, the vote is a majority. What I believe as an individual isn't the point. The parish council as a whole wouldn't accept it, but people seem to think that it's your fault. Hey ho, it goes with the territory. We then had, as I said earlier, we then had the elections, but it galvanized the community into action, which was fantastic. And as a result of the application being resubmitted, the amount of support that was sent into Baines in writing for comments on the application was, I've forgotten the exact number, but it was not far off 100 from memory. I may be wrong, but it was a large number. And if you think of this being a community of 420 something voters, that's a huge number writing in.
That is a huge number.
It is. As a result, some people had their vote who didn't support the application. Their votes went down at the election. So there is widespread feeling within the community about the climate change. I could go on and bore everyone rigid about the school.
So eventually the school got their solar panels.
They did. It's there, it's installed, and it's running, and we haven't had a single complaint. There's a surprise. The main complaint was because it's in a conservation area, it's going to ruin people's views. Black solar panels on a black tiled roof. Okay.
It's a real difficulty of the planning system, getting planning policy to catch up with political ideas changing, especially when they're changing as fast as things have been changing around climate emergency lately.
It is. I suppose Freshford's got a background in not particularly worrying about the planning law, but worrying about what the community needs and what the community thinks. That's how we got the shop built, the galleries, which was built in a field in the centre of a village, Greenbelt, AOMB.
So Freshford didn't have a shop before?
It closed down. It's part of commercial reality. The village shop closed. It couldn't be kept running. It was too small. And the way
Galleries is a community shop?
It's a community shop. It's run on a charitable basis. It's owned by a group called FLISCA, Freshford and Limpley Stoke Society Community Association. So it's charitable, and all profits from the shop get ploughed back into the community. So no individual makes money out of it other than the salaried staff, quite rightly. And the way that got built was the planners were going to refuse it, got forced to be taken to committee, and basically half the village turned out and welcomed the Baines Planning Committee. The strength of feeling was realised and was understood to be an exceptional case and was approved.
That's a positive story.
It is positive, and I see no reason why that approach shouldn't continue whilst the planning process catches up.
How How important do you think it is for a village like Freshford to have a shop?
Fundamental, vital, 100%. It's been the lifeblood, the saving of this community during the this lockdown.
Mhm. And I mean, do you see connections between communities having facilities like shops and the climate emergency?
So I'm sorry, I slightly missed that question.
Well, connections in your mind between any issues to do with the climate emergency and communities having things like shops. I suppose in my
Oh,
mind, I'm thinking.
fundamental.
Go
It
on.
it has to be. By having facilities locally, you're creating a much more sustainable community. You're taking travel off the road. Um, in terms of the climate itself, the climate emergency, you're actually bringing local produce, local goods together for local people. I don't mean to sound like that TV program, but it is keeping things within the locality and creates a life of its own. Um,
Does it make for a more resilient community, would you say?
Without a doubt,
Yeah.
absolutely. Each point that could be raised about the benefits of the shop isn't major in itself, but if you pull them together as a whole, it creates such a community hub. It's not true.
And as you say, during the crisis, I think we've seen the importance of relationships between local people. I've noticed that in my own village.
Absolutely. The way people have rallied round to support each other is incredible. And I'm sure we're not unique in this. Um, I know so many communities have done exactly what we've done, and that's to make sure those who are vulnerable, who are in isolation, have got all the food they need, the medicines they need, the care they need, the mental side is being addressed, and it's communities looking after themselves. And in Freshford, it's ourselves. And the galleries were central to this. Absolutely. And how everyone has rallied round is incredible. I see. And how does that relate to the climate emergency? It's the togetherness. It's what can be achieved if we work together.
Yes. And so are there things you've done in Freshford to reduce carbon emissions from transport?
Um, the shop in its deliveries, because it was actually beginning to set up a delivery service, um, electric free cars. So, in terms of what it's done to date, the galleries is largely self-reliant on renewable energy because a whole bank of solar panels was put up at the top of the hill behind what's called a ha. Strange name, but it's basically from afar, all you can see is a grass bank, but it's actually earth that's been dug out, ramped up, and the solar panels are hidden from view. So even within an AOMB, it's possible to get significant solar power without impacting the planning requirements of maintaining the view, because it was known to be a critical view. So yes, the galleries has added quite a bit. It's proven what can be done. The next question is how can we take this whole concept further and address energy for the whole community?
Yes. Have you got ideas around that?
We've got ideas. We've got several hills in the area, and the thought, and this is possibly speaking a bit early, but the thought is to bring solar power into play. Um, how much farmland would be lost through solar, not wind turbines being put in of whatever type they may be? I would suggest very little at the end of the day, because you're talking of a huge acreage, and wind turbines don't use a lot of space. So that has to be an option moving forwards.
Yeah.
And if you look at places like Aberystwyth, which has got about the same number of houses that we do, they've got one massive wind turbine. I'm not suggesting we do one massive one, but they become totally self-reliant on energy. I think it's Aberystwyth. It is a village in Wales.
Well, yes, absolutely. Well, that's a really great plan, something to aspire to. What about ecology? Are there things you've managed to achieve around ecology?
Um, we're moving in that direction. We've got some very ecologically minded people in the village, and we're looking to move the cemetery to be managed through rewilding around the edges and around the edges of the tining, and also maintain the trees, because the tining isn't just a grass bank; it also includes an amount of the trees down the hillside behind the tining, and we're looking to move that whole area to becoming more ecologically minded. It's just been left, which is good in itself, but there's more that can be done. We're looking to plant more trees within Freshford. In Limpty Stoke, they've been moving forwards with planting a huge amount of trees. We'd be looking to bring ecology into the neighbourhood plan in a far greater detail to aid with the planning. And then we're also linked with Winsley, and they're undertaking, they're leading the way on us in this aspect. They've been undertaking huge amount of tree planting and rewilding of areas. So it's a growing subject. The thing about Freshford is it's so green to begin with. It's difficult to see how to make it greener. That
There
makes
might
some
be things
kind of
that
sense.
you can do to enhance diversity, I suppose. Where sometimes a green space that looks green, it may or may not be diverse.
Well, one of the things I can see coming is in planning. We've definitely had a couple of planning applications that have damaged the local ecology. So it's more plugging gaps that exist.
Yes. And have you
Um,
have you had initiatives? Have you had initiatives to reduce waste?
um, we're very much led by Baines on that, and also there's been a lady in Limpty Stoke who's been leading talks on the climate, um, which has been laying the foundations for moving forwards. So there have been individual topics built up through talks, which have been quite well attended, to be fair. And these initiatives are building up. How we address waste moving forwards in a wider context is something, if we're honest, we've got to address properly.
Right. Well, that's probably the end of my questions, John. But it's been really exciting hearing about so many initiatives. We've got a poll now for our audience. So the question we want to ask you is, so I don't know how many of the audience know, but Bath and North East Somerset run something called community forums where we bring several parishes together. And the question we wanted to ask you is whether you think that we should make a climate emergency a standing item on the agenda for parishes to discuss together. So that's the poll for the audience. And now it's a chance to find out whether the audience have got any questions for John. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Councillor Matt McCabe, and we'll see whether we've got any questions.
Hopefully I've appeared. Yes, we've got some questions here, starting with Michaela. Couple of questions. Do you think there are opportunities to be bolder with your neighbourhood plan in terms of the climate emergency, John?
Yes, is a straight answer to that. I think there are areas we need to be. We really do need. I mean, the area. I mean, Sarah raised the key point, which is the area of planning, and that's where neighbourhood plans can be very, very helpful, because Sarah's right. It is identifying land for specific land use, but also we as a community can bring in our views on some of the detail of how building should be conducted within our community. The existing neighbourhood plan has got something called the Village's Design Statement, which lays out at a high level how buildings should be constructed, in terms of materials. But why shouldn't that be extended to include requirements on energy, transport, carbon neutrality? Now that's a contentious subject.
And she mentions that the call for sites for renewables is also up and running as part of the local plan. So what advice have you got for other parish councils who say aren't as far ahead as you, but who want to start the conversation in terms of taking action on climate change?
I would say, well, if I just give my experience, which is look for gaining the majority view, there will always be naysayers. There will always people who argue against. That's not a problem. Our parish council is by no means 100% in line with every activity that we undertake. The democratic view is collective responsibility. So if you have a majority vote, you're free to move along those lines. And if you've got a groundswell of community opinion, it's very difficult for councillors to argue against that. We're elected councillors, and if the community do not like the decisions that we make, your vote is affected. Now, we see that on a national level, but I would suggest that our last elections, certainly in Freshford, we've seen that at a community level too. So it's a power to bring people together has to be the biggest thing.
Okay. Question from Anna from Freshford, smaller than from Clamerton, sorry, which is smaller than Freshford. We have recently completed our first neighbourhood plan, which had the active support from most of our residents, including the boating community. Is there any point declaring a climate emergency?
Personally, and this is my personal view, I think there is, because it means that your decisions, the decisions undertaken by the parish council, have to align with the policies that the parish council has. By declaring a climate emergency, that actually is a clear declaration as to how you are going to undertake decision making moving forwards. The most obvious aspect is in terms of reviewing planning applications. It gives you a huge amount of power as a parish council if you've got that as a resolution. So your responses to a planning application as a statutory consultee have to be given due consideration because they carry full weight.
Question from Jackie here. During COVID, there's been fewer car journeys or journeys by car and plane, more home working using the village. Does this make it a good time to change people's behaviour in terms of climate action? And how might you go about doing this? Maybe that's one for both of you.
Fantastic. Sarah, please.
I think it's a brilliant time for changing people's behaviour because I think they've been shaken out of their usual routines and they've been experiencing the world differently. So of course it's been a difficult time for many and a tragic time for some, so not forgetting that, but for those who've had the I suppose the headspace to notice, to appreciate, there has been obviously much cleaner air and a reduction in car movements, and people have been able to go around on foot and by bike, and that is a nice thing to experience. And you know, and with some of us have been able to notice nature sort of having a little bit of a resurgence. So again, I suppose it makes us, those with time again and with the availability, have a chance to reflect on the impact of our normal way of life and on whether there's things we could do differently. And so, well, part of the question was how, and that of course is difficult. But I mean, on the transport front, the government has given us some additional powers, which we hope to put into action in Bath and North East Somerset soon. So that's, I suppose, at unitary authority level. What else? John, do you want to have a go? Are there things you think you can do from a parish level?
Can you just repeat the question for me, please? I'm sorry.
It's about how do we change behaviours, the sort of behaviours we're enjoying now, and the world we're enjoying now whilst we're in lockdown, and the benefits that's had to the environment. How do we hang on to some of those behaviours?
That is a fantastic question, and one is a discussion that I've had with several people, and I really wish I had the answer to say, this is how you do it.
It must be about people using your village shop, and this has gone on for so long now that some people who didn't used to use it will have got into a habit of using it.
Well, so this is very true.
We have to hold on to those kind of changes in behaviour. Another thing I've noticed. Go on.
Well, I was going to say, I've got another question from Diana from Shoscombe, who's on the Parish Council at Shoscombe, saying, obviously that's a very diverse community of 5 separate hamlets. They don't have a shop, but it could help. If they were to initiate a renewable energy project, it would be for the school or the village hall, but wonders if they're at a planning disadvantage without a neighbourhood plan, but have a very keen parish council. What advice would you give to Diana in that situation?
I'd suggest the neighbourhood plan is actually not the be-all and end-all. If you have drive within the local community, you can make it happen. If you look at how we got the shop done, it was actually against all planning law at that time, because you can't build in green fields within Greenbelt and OMB, yet it ended up being approved. If you can show exceptional need, you can get things through if the local community is there backing it. A neighbourhood plan doesn't necessarily within itself show backing, because that is at a higher level, if you like. Not going to go into the detail of that type of plan. Go for it.
Stacey's asking a question: have you assigned any specific budget from your precept for council for climate initiatives?
As yet, no. There is a possibility / probability of that happening, but to set an amount in the precept, we need something firm to take hold of. We really do. The issues that we've got in Freshford meant that we've actually ended up with a significant increase in our precept this year, because of the loss of the street cleaning grant from Baines. So that actually meant our precept has gone up by 10% due to nothing we could do about that. If we want to maintain existing services, have to do that. I can see that happening from next year moving forwards.
Chris asks a question: you've got a train station in such a small village. How have you taken, or how will you take advantage of that going forwards?
That's an excellent question. We would dearly love to be able to take more advantage of that. The issue we've got at Freshford Station, if anyone knows it, is getting people parking space there, because local people in the village do walk to the station. That's fine. However, people from slightly further away have nowhere really to park. It's only got space. I don't know the exact. I can't remember the exact number of cars. 10-ish, 14. So it really is not a reasonably sized car park to hold many commuters, or God forbid, people during the day. So if we can find a way of getting people to the station, then it would be more widely used. There's no way you can get a minibus down Freshford Station Road. I don't know if any of you guys have been down there, but it is it's interesting taking a Volvo estate down there. Let's put it this way.
Indeed. Jane mentions that there's a parish toolkit for help for any parishes who want to work on climate stuff, and the council's climate page on the website can link you to that. Ian's asking, has Freshford explored becoming a plastic-free community, and how could the galleries have a system for refill?
That was something that we were moving forwards with. That was a key topic in one of the last talks that Denise held on the climate. And yes, we were about to hit with a plastic-free campaign. No, we haven't yet, and yet that is something that has to be done. I can't say much more than that, than pretend we haven't dealt with that yet.
Somebody here has made a comment. I have had 2 family deaths linked to COVID. I'd consider, and they would have considered it, a fitting memorial to change behaviour to make for a better environment. Indeed, that's quite an important point. Chris asks a question: would a car share scheme actively promoted with and across the village, especially where bus services are limited or do not exist? Have you tried that? Have you tried that in Freshford?
It's interesting. Within the community, many people actually don't drive because we've got an elderly population, or they drive very infrequently. We have what's called a link service. So if you don't drive, that is not a problem. You can still be taken places. So you travel when you need to travel. That's a key reason why we're wanting to get the Freshford surgery back, but that's a Freshford thing. The big issue that we have in terms of transport is the school. The problems we have, and I'm sure other villages with school have probably very similar issues. The actual cars used by the average family have changed over the last 20 years, from being just a small run around to carry the kids around to now a massive big SUV. And our lanes are getting clogged. Our roads in Freshford weren't built for the motor car, they were built for horses. And that's a thorny issue we're trying to get to grips with.
Jane just reminded us that Bath and West Community Energy can help parishes develop renewable energy projects. So if you've got one, Bath and West Community Energy is a good place to go for advice and support. Anna's pointing out that they have a big problem with visitors to Whalley Weir. That's been a problem, and I think it's been in the news again about people breaking the lockdown by lots of cars turning up. Do you think declaring a climate emergency would give them any extra powers?
I couldn't answer that. I'm sorry. I'd like to.
Yeah, it's worth exploring, I would have thought.
I'm not aware that a climate emergency is a formal thing I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I will say, but I'm not aware that it gives you any formal additional powers, but I suppose it's worth exploring.
I mean, that actually hedges onto an issue that certainly I know some of our residents don't necessarily get their head around. And that said, a parish council is not an enforcement body.
Yeah.
I've certainly had a number of people approach me wanting the parish council to take action against people who've been breaking the guidelines during the lockdown. Well, sorry, we do not have the powers to do that.
No, I've got a couple more questions. I know we're almost out of time. Sue's asking, has the issue of insulating houses on the outside ever come up in the village? It's rather, we would expect it's rather difficult in terms of conservation issues. Have you had that in the village?
No, we haven't. I'm not sure where that question is coming from. In my mind, you're talking about cladding.
Well, I've got some friends who've externally clad their building and then refaced it, but their house wasn't in the green belt and it wasn't in an area of outstanding natural beauty. So they tried not to increase the footprint too much. But I suppose I've not heard of it in our parish.
No, I haven't. That's an interesting point. A lot of Freshford is covered by conservation area.
Yeah, I imagine it may bring up difficult planning dilemmas. But maybe some people should, people who feel strongly and who have the money to spare should try. And we need to try and get a few through the planning system, perhaps.
Yes, it's something we can look into, Sue. Finally, Vipal says, do John and Sarah have any idea how many people in areas like Freshford currently commute by car to city offices? In other words, what potential do we have to enable those people to work in the village in dedicated community hubs and cut travel emissions?
Very good question. Sorry, Sarah.
You want me to have a go? I mean, I don't know any numbers, but I think it's a great question, because one of the things coming out from the coronavirus crisis and the urgency there is to keep cars out of the city centre with good reason. One of the things that is in the back of my mind and is a worry is that may just move the problem to the countryside. So if we, one approach would be to direct everyone to park in the park and ride and then walk down a nice day into town because they're worried about getting on the bus and the public health issues associated with that. And that worries me that it will just push the problem to the countryside. So I have been trying to get some discussion going around how we can avoid that happening. In this scenario where we don't universally have rural bus services or train services, although Freshford does have, but many villages don't at the moment. And so one of the things I agree that will be important will be to get more villages to have community centres like your galleries in Freshford, and possibly even things like co-working hubs, more of the facilities that people need close to one another, to reduce the need for travel. And it may be that some of those habits that some of us have built up in the last couple of months from having to work from home, might encourage people to consider that who wouldn't have done before. So it'll be really challenging to know how to bring it about, but these are the kind of ideas that I definitely want to get discussing.
And Andy snuck in one last question. What support are you expecting to see over the coming year from Baines to help meet their 3 key objectives of energy efficiency improvements in existing housing stock, reductions in transport emissions, and the ambitious renewable energy objective? What have we managed to hang on to?
Are you asking me, or what do you think?
In terms of resources, Sarah.
Resources, goodness. I mean, well, so as you'll probably be aware from the news, the council's finances have been very badly impacted by coronavirus, and budget discussions are ongoing. At this precise moment, we are going to have to revisit. So we agreed a budget back in February that put in lots of new resources around sustainability, renewables, and that sort of thing. And discussions are ongoing at this moment. Obviously, as an administration, we're really hopeful that we can hang on to those things, but some very difficult decisions are going to have to be made. And if we didn't make them, so if as an administration we said we don't intend to make those cuts, what would happen is that the council, would come to the point where officers would say, well, in fact, as a council, you're going to go bust, and therefore we will take all the powers away from you councillors. So we councillors will have to be starting to take those decisions over the next week or two.
Okay, so this is final, and I'll take it as a suggestion, John, rather than one you have to answer. Is there an opportunity to use the disused siding on the railway between Freshford and Limpley-Stoke as a level walking route to the station and the canal to help address the issue of the small car park? So I'll let you take that one away and hand back to Sarah.
Yeah, I'd take that one away. There's a few underlying issues with access to Freshford Station that this isn't perhaps the forum to bring them up on, but it's watch this space.
Okay.
Right, I want to say big thank yous to everybody now. So thank yous to you, the audience, for coming and tuning in and listening and asking brilliant questions, and for asking our poll, answering our poll, where there was unanimous support for putting climate emergency onto the agenda of the community forum meetings. Perhaps that's not surprising given the likely makeup of the audience. So thank yous to John Adler for coming and answering questions, Matt McCabe, Councillor Matt McCabe, who's helped me to field the questions, and Matt Back, who you haven't seen but has been in the background as a volunteer technical support. So I've got another session like this next Thursday at 6 o'clock, which will be with school strikers, Elsa and Polly France, and you'll be able to catch up on this session in a few days. It'll be up on my YouTube channel if you missed the beginning and you want to go back to it. So thank you everybody very much. It's been great to see you, and I'll see some of you again next week.
Thank you.